we start on class stuff, I'm sorry we're here. She should not be here today.
Yeah, I said the same thing. I was really sure.
There is a march to observe Martin Luther King at 5 o'clock this afternoon. All right. It will start at the Memorial Building, which is over by the outdoor city pool, if you know where that is. And it will come to campus, and then there are going to be activities and some food and that for students. Okay. It seems to me that the powers that be have done a really awful job this year of letting the students, the faculty and the staff know what is available today. So there was supposed to have been some activities during the day, but I don't think, other than if you look at the ENMU homepage, that's the only place it is. They haven't emailed anyone, they haven't put up any posters about anything this year. It's been really badly organized. So please come and join us. There are many faculty on campus who would like the university to observe MLK Day. And we are looking at that in Faculty Senate. I'm on an ad hoc committee to try to find out what other states do. Because we have President's Day off, that's the argument for why we can't have MLK Day off. Because it would impact Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes, and particularly there are Monday-only classes. And so that's the argument as to why or one of the arguments for why we don't observe MLK. However, as I said, there are a lot of faculty who would like to, but it needs you guys to get on board, right? It doesn't matter how much talk we do. If the students don't show up at these events, the administration will say the students don't care that they didn't have the day off because they didn't bother coming to the events anyway. All right? So if you care and you would like to support the fight to try to observe MLK Day, you need to show. All right? So if you can, if you're available, if you're not in class or at work, please come and walk with us at 5 o'clock. All right? Okay. On to stuff. All right, we had looked at the diet, the nutrition side of trying to change body composition very, very briefly. We will come back to that a lot more in other chapters. So today we're going to look initially at the role that exercise plays there. And since we're all movement people, you're all brought on to the fact that if we want to change body composition, whether we want to gain muscle mass or if we want to lose fat mass, that would involve moving. All right? But it doesn't for everybody. Many people just diet, and that's their only version of trying to change their body composition. All right? But if we exercise or add physical activity in as well, then it can help to decrease fat mass, particularly if we're doing aerobic work. All right? And it can increase fat-free mass, which over time would increase your resting metabolic rate. Remember that RMR is the largest calorie expenditure that we have within the day. All right? So when I exercise, I increase basal metabolic rate for an hour, a couple of hours. But if I exercise consistently and I build some muscle tone and muscle mass, then I'm going to affect my long-term RMR. All right? So I can, if I'm looking at percentage body fat, I can decrease my fat mass that would impact percentage. Or I can stay the same amount of fat and increase muscle mass, and overall that would decrease percentage. So remember that percentage is kind of a relative to everything else in the body, right? Estimating calculating energy expenditure is quite complicated. It involves many different variables. Okay? How big is the person involved? Are they 7 foot and 6 foot wide? You know? Are they 4 foot 10 and teeny weeny? Right? What intensity are they training at? Which muscles are they using? Right? If we're lifting, how many sets and reps? Like what's the volume of work that's being completed? And particularly rest periods are important when we're looking at resistance work, which I'll come back to in a minute. So if you look at pages 362 and 363, on 362, box 12.5 is a really great summary of what it takes to change body composition. All right? What are the important things I should be taking into account if that's one of my goals? And then when you look at page 363, box 12.6 gives you a calculation to estimate your calorie expenditure if you're running or walking. Now, it is an estimate because unless you have a face mask and a computer pack on, you're not doing a real measure, okay? But it's a pretty good estimate. So the next time that you're out at the trail, if you go, does anybody go out and walk or run at the trail? It's very nice out there, it's a good place to go. Safer than walking around school, rather more exciting than walking at the track, right? It was better before they murdered all the little prairie dogs, but they did. I think some people complained of rattlesnakes, and so they went out with explosions, and they put the explosion. It was all very sad. Anyway, but it's really nice out there. Use it because it's much nicer than walking around in town. But you know, you can have an idea of how many calories did that walk give me, right? For my energy balance, my scale, okay? Now, if we're comparing resistance work with aerobic work, this part of the chapter is a little messy, I think, all right? The research here is not equivocal. Some people say they're not the same. Other pieces of research seem to imply that I can spend the same amount of calories doing a resistance training workout as I can going for a run, right? Measuring calorie expenditure is very tricky. As I said, unless you've got a mask and a computer pack, nothing else is accurate at this point in time. So everything else is an estimate, okay? The overall kind of stand right now is that if you have sessions of equal length that are being performed at equal intensity, they would result in equivalent energy expenditure, whether it was aerobic or resistance work. Just be careful if you're reading those studies, because a lot of the studies look at the energy expenditure after the end of the exercise session rather than during the exercise session. You have to take into account energy expenditure during the session and during epoch, which is the hour or so afterwards, which we'll come back to and talk about in chapter 3. Right? So there's some difficulty there. If my resistance work has rest periods of a minute or longer, then I'm using energy system number 1, which will start this week, and I'm not working aerobically, well then I can't be impacting fat mass in the same way, right? And all this will make more sense as we get into the technical bit over the next couple of weeks. So we can say, whatever kind of training I'm doing, or physical activity I'm doing, if I'm not exercising, right? Exercise is physical activity, but not all physical activity is exercise, right? That I will spend more calories during that period of time than I would have done had I been sitting still, right? That's obvious. And we do know that certainly once I'm exercising at a moderate to high intensity, that my energy expenditure, my resting metabolic rate for the next 24 to 48 hours goes up, depending upon what the exercise was and how hard it was, and how long it was, right? Weight training may add some advantage because it impacts our fat-free mass, and muscles use energy and fat cells don't, right? So the more muscle mass I have, the more energy expenditure I'm able to do just sitting down. Okay. So taking a moderate view, right? Moderation. Balanced diet, we're not going to do silly diets. We'll look at those in a minute. We're going to do a combination, preferably, of changing our nutritional intake slightly, right, so that it is more balanced and I make healthier food choices, and maybe cut my calories down a little. We're going to add aerobic work and resistance. It doesn't have to be weight training, because press-ups, chin-ups, handstands, sit-ups, body weight exercise counts as resistance work. Right? Can everybody see this? Do we need the light off? Are we okay? All right. So this study they report in the book, I made it into a table to make it easier to see the impact. In this study, they had 3 groups of men, right? And they put them into a weight loss, fat loss program for 3 months, right? And all 3 groups lost about 20 pounds over the 3 months. So they all lost the same. Group 1 only changed their calorie intake. So they decreased their calorie intake quite a lot, and they lost 20 pounds. When they looked at their body composition, they had lost 69% fat mass of the weight of that 20 pounds. 69% was fat mass. Okay. Group 2 dropped their calorie intake and added aerobic work, so walking, running, riding a bike, possibly swimming, right? All those kinds of activities. They lost their 20 pounds. When they checked their body composition, of the 20 pounds, 78% was fat loss. Okay? Group 3 changed their calorie intake, added aerobics, and added resistance work. And here's the key, right? They lost their 20 pounds. 97% of their 20 pounds was fat loss, not muscle or bone mass, right? So that is pretty crucial for yourself, for family members, for clients if you're going to be a physical trainer, right? Because if we don't include the resistance, then when we do group 1 and group 2, a lot of the weight loss ends up being muscle mass because you've decreased your calories and you're not stressing the muscles hard enough to maintain their size. And the aerobics ramps up your resting metabolic rate, and so you start dropping muscle mass as well as fat mass, right? So if you don't want to change the weight on the scale, what you want to do is lose this, then you need to add the resistance in as well, right? The older you get, trust me, the more important it is. Right? And again, that resistance doesn't have to be going down to the gym and lifting weights. Right? I did that all my life until a few years ago, and now I'm like, I cannot go inside anymore and do my exercise. I have to be outside. But then when I do my laps at the trail, there's a nice little bench there. I do step-ups, I do press-ups, and right? So I can do resistance work without coming into a gym. That makes sense? So if you're making programs for other people, it's really important that you think about all three pieces of the pie. Okay? So we looked at that chart Friday, I think, where we had body fat ranges that were unhealthy and lean athletes and lean non-athletes and then overweight, all right? So we know that body fat percentage is typically lower in athletes, whether they're male or female, than the average, all right? Remember our lower limits, that we should not be encouraging or supporting our athletes to get very, very, very low levels of body fat, right? That's not healthy for normal functioning. Something's going to give, right? You also have to allow for the fact that different techniques, on Thursday we'll look at a couple of techniques. All measuring techniques have error. Some of them have more error than others. Skin folds have pretty good error levels if they're done by someone who's very good at them. When we do them on Thursday, the error's going to be all over the place, right? Because most of you probably have never used a set of skin calipers before. Okay? So you have to allow for that, which technique. If I'm doing a pre-post, I have to use the same technique pre and post. I can't do skin folds for the pre-measure and then use a bioimpedance machine for my post-measure. Right? That's not appropriate. Okay? And we all know that performance at the end of the day isn't just about my body composition, right? There's a lot more to it. There's motivation, there's the will to win, there's all this other stuff that goes into a great performance. And so we often see people who we're like, don't have the best body for the sport, and yet they blow everybody out of the water, right? Because there's more to it than that, right? But you should pay attention to the fact that for some people, dropping their body fat percentage impacts performance, and they just don't do well at that lower body fat. Right? There's a tennis player at the moment, Svitolina, who dropped like, oh my God, I don't know, from the Aussie Open last year, January, to the summer. She must have dropped, and she wasn't, I mean, she was a international professional tennis player. It's not like she was obese. she must have lost 25 pounds. I mean, she went, when the game went down the pan, she went from number 4 to like number 12 almost overnight because she couldn't hit the ball down. She'd hit the ball and it was plopping over the net, and right? Because all her power went away. Right? So you just have to play with it a little bit and be willing to be flexible. Don't be a coach who says all my athletes have to be X% body fat, or have to be in this range and have a really tiny range, because that might not work for everybody on the team. Okay. I'm a little behind. All right. Where's my 12.5? Okay, page 365. There is a table there. Have a look at the table and tell me which groups of athletes would be considered at risk for poor health, given the conversations that we've had now. Which groups have an increased health risk? Bodybuilding, right. Men are borderline, the women are way too low, right? Distance running, women are really, really borderline, right? Same with the sprinters for the girls. And what about the shot put? They're pretty high, right? So they're at risk because they're a little bit too fat, a little bit too much fat, right? Okay, so there's all kinds of information out there. Different textbooks have different sets of info, or if you look online, you can find, like if I'm a volleyball player, what's the range of percentage body fat that would be considered optimal for me to perform at my best, right? It's probably not 12% to 15% for a volleyball player, right? Okay. So one of the outcomes when we're trying to change body composition and we look at what happens when we are physically active, then for some people, not for everybody, but for some people, if they exercise really hard, they find that they can't eat for a while afterwards, particularly if they've been exercising in a hot environment, right? So we see this short-term decrease in appetite, which can be a problem when we start to look at carbohydrate and protein metabolism, right? Because we want to synthesize carbs and store them, and we want to build muscle. I need to eat pretty quickly after the end of the exercise session, but for some people they just can't. The thought of putting something solid into their stomach is nauseating. It's one of the times when I would say I'm not a big fan of drinks, but if you have an athlete or a client that has that problem, that's a good time for a carb protein mixed drink, right? Doesn't have to be powder. So there's several reasons why that decrease might occur for different individuals. It could be that our epinephrine and norepinephrine levels that go up when we exercise are still too high in the blood, and they may be impacting the desire to eat, right? And the elevated body temperature that we get by training hard could also impact. Right? And as I already mentioned, the hot environment is generally worse. People have more trouble if it's hot than if they're training when it's cool, typically. And you're going to know someone who's the exact opposite, but it's just the way XPhys goes, right? So that's the acute effect that can be seen for some people. The long-term effect of exercise, because you've spent all those additional energies, means that it increases your appetite, right? You're hungry. So bodybuilders carry little jars, or used to, they probably don't now because they've all got clever protein bars and things, but they used to carry, when I was young, they used to carry baby food, little jars of baby food in their gym bag, because it's really easy to digest and it's high in protein and vitamins, right? So, ghrelin stimulates your appetite, so long-term high levels of exercise end up making you feel hungry. You've used all those calories. Your brain says, okay, I need some calories now. Right? Leptin suppresses appetite, so again, depends on the individual and their hormonal responses to exercise. Okay. So then if I'm training really hard, I have to increase my calorie intake. You have to, right? Any of the competitive athletes in this room ought to be eating well over 2,000 calories a day. The guys should probably be up near 5. Right? The amount of work that you do, you need a lot of calories. Right? Tour de France, they eat about 10,000 calories a day when they're racing. Tour de France. Obviously, a lot of that is liquid form because you couldn't eat 10,000 calories a day. But yeah, they use an immense amount. The bodybuilders, I used to work in a bodybuilding gym, and the amount of food those people put away is unreal. Unreal. So you have to balance that. You can't be a normal person and train that hard. You just can't. Okay? The key is make sure it's good quality calories that are going to fuel your exercise, not trash it.
So, how would you put that many calories on like someone, say, who doesn't have that much money, like, but they still want?
I think it's easy for me because I like tin tuna, right? And tin tuna is really cheap, and I like baked beans, and they're really cheap, and they're both good sources of protein. So, baked potato, tin of baked beans, and a load of grated cheese on top, and you've got a cheap meal that's got a lot of calories in it. I used to use, when I had no money, I would do tuna and onion and rice and stir fry it with some seasoning and add some frozen peas. I mean, it's not hard to eat well with a little money, but you have to be creative. And you have to be willing to make the time to make the food. You can't go out and buy it for cheap and get good food. You have to make it. So I think that's the key. You know, if you don't have time during the week, do you have a day at the weekend where you could make 5 days worth of meals and put them in the freezer and then just pull out one each day? If you're someone that doesn't put on weight, well, I know I used to have a soccer player in class, and he struggled every semester. He would put on weight over the break, and as soon as they started training. He put on some muscle mass in the pre-season with LV, and then they'd go into season, and his weight would just like drop like a stone. And he could not maintain that additional muscle mass and keep that strong, because he just couldn't eat enough calories to do the work. Hi, we were just talking about you.
You couldn't eat enough calories.
We don't have that trouble, do we, LV?
He wasn't dedicated to getting enough energy. Dr. Wall, you should talk, you should give these guys an example of eating big on a small budget, because most of you gotta have money to do that.
I was just mentioning the amazing qualities of baked potatoes, baked beans, and cheese.
Which you can buy those little cans for like $1, right?
There you go. When he took this class, he didn't make that much sense. It's taken him a while. Okay, so when we want to consider losing body mass, then we want to approach it from a healthy point of view, all right? We want to maintain our energy. We don't want to risk hurting our bodies. Typically, the goal for body mass loss is fat mass, but as I've mentioned, if you've got a very large power athlete or strength athlete who wants to drop some muscle mass, that's actually quite difficult. That takes a year or two before muscle mass starts dropping off. So the first goal is to lose the fat mass. The second goal is to maintain the loss so we don't have this up and down, up and down, up and down that so many people go through their whole lives, right? They go on a diet, they lose weight, they stop the diet, they put the weight back on. They go on another diet, they lose the weight, right? This roller coaster is not healthy mentally because it makes you not feel good about yourself, and it's not healthy physically for your body to go up and down like this, right? So the goal is 1 to 2 pounds a week, right? So a pound of fat has 3,500 calories, right? So if I'm going to lose 1 pound of fat, I have to have a deficit on my seesaw in my energy balance of 500 calories a day. Right? Well, if you go out to the trail and you walk a really fast 3 laps, that's 3 miles, that's maybe 250 calories, depending upon who you are. Right? So 500 calorie deficit is quite difficult, but I don't want to do it all on the food, remember. Some of it on the exercise side, some of it on the food side. Right? If I want to lose 2 pounds, the calorie deficit has to be 1,000 calories a day. Right? But, so for a lot of people, especially when we look at these silly magazines and some gorgeous looking actress goes, oh, I lost 10 pounds in 2 weeks. Right? She didn't. It's actually physiologically almost impossible to lose more than 4 pounds of fat a week, because what you would have to do to achieve that is not really doable. Right? If I lose 1 pound a week, that's 52 pounds in a year. That would be a pretty good weight loss goal. right? If I lose 2 pounds a week, that's 104 pounds in 1 year. And it won't come back because I'll have trained myself over the course of a year to a different lifestyle. Right? We have to allow for the fact that different people respond differently. So you might have 2 clients, you do the exact same thing. One client drops 5 pounds in a month and the other client drops 2 pounds in a month, and they're not very happy, right? For some people, it takes a while for the body to kickstart and start losing fat mass. Other people lose it quite easily given the right regime. How much weight do I need to lose? Right? If I want to meet my fat loss goal, how much weight do I want to lose? Box 12 Box 12.7 gives you a way of calculating if I lose 10% of my body fat, how much will I now weigh with that 10% loss? So this is really good because now instead of getting on the scale and saying, I'm going to lose 10 pounds of what, right? Now I can have a specific fat percentage loss goal and I know how much I'm going to weigh at the end of it. And most of that loss will have been fat, not muscle or water, right? So this idea is quite important because we don't want to say, I want to lose X pounds, because that doesn't tell me anything. I can lose 10 pounds by Saturday if I stop eating carbs and don't drink very much for the next 4 days, right? But what good is it? I'll fall on my face when I'm doing my down dog because I'll be so wobbly. Okay? So remember, the deficit is the key. Intake to output on that energy balance scale. Right? And maintenance then. So I have to retrain people to eat a little less or a little differently, depending on what their goal is and what the issue is. Move a little more. Right? Maintenance is easier the harder you exercise. Right? So if you get someone over the course of a year to be working out at a really quite high intensity, it's much easier for them then to maintain that weight loss. Right? If I drop my intensity down, I have to drop the calories down. Right? Otherwise the weight starts creeping back again. So particular sports are at more risk for doing very, very silly things to try to lose weight, right? So any sport where how you look plays a role, so gymnastics, diving, skating, is part of your score, then they're at risk of doing very silly things. Any weight class sport, so boxing, hockey, jockeys, powerlifters, anywhere where if I was the heaviest person in a lower class, I would have an advantage. So in college I did some powerlifting and the stuff that went on, and I was as guilty as anybody else. I mean, we did stupid things, like you put a rubber suit on, you know, like a rain suit, a plastic pants for the rain, and you go and sit in the sauna for half an hour, and then you'd run round the gym for half an hour, and hope that you lost a pound from the first weigh-in to the second weigh-in. I mean, it was ridiculous. Wrestlers, high school wrestling is apparently a really big problem. There's a lot of abuse of dieting and other forms of trying to lose weight. So, any kind of crash diet puts you at risk for dehydration. Dehydration has all kinds of negative issues associated with it. One, you can't pay any attention to any of the really cool information I'm giving you in class, right? Two, you go out for a run on a bumpy surface and you're not paying attention and you turn your ankle over and you sprain your ankle and now you can't play your game at the weekend, right? I mentioned that last week, carbohydrates are stored with water, and that's why low-carb diets appear to work so well. Right? The magnitude of the effect of the dehydration will depend upon whether you're an anaerobic or an aerobic athlete. But there's still an effect. You're not working at your optimal performance level, which is the whole point of all the work you put in. Right? So we'll cover a lot of dehydration issues when we look at chapter 10. All right. So eating, weight loss problems in female athletes is such a big issue that the medical community actually came up with an umbrella term called the female athlete triad. And it is mainly girls, women athletes, female athletes, although now we're seeing an increase in male athletes having problems. So female athlete triad is a combination or some combination of menstruation problems, bone density issues, and eating disorders. Okay? So they interrelate. They all go back to the idea of energy intake, body composition, and diet. Right? If I'm not eating enough calories for the amount of work that I'm doing, then my body will shut down systems that are not important to keep me alive, i.e. menstruation. Right? Bone density, so if I'm on a really strict diet, so one of the things that everybody believes is, oh, I can't eat dairy food, right? So I don't have any milk, I don't have any cheese, I don't have any yogurt. I don't eat my ice cream, can you imagine? I can't imagine life without ice cream. So then they really decrease their calcium intake, but you have to have calcium to function. Well, we've got this great store of calcium, it's called bones. So it just starts leaching calcium from your bones to support the other functions that calcium does in the body. All right? So bone density problems leading to osteoporosis, which is high risk of bone fracture, are a big problem. And then eating disorders. Eating disorders like anorexia nervosa or bulimia nervosa have a very strict criteria to be classified like that. So I think for bulimia, you have to throw up, purge 3 or 4 times a week for at least 4 weeks to be considered bulimic or something like that, right? It's really, really strict. But if you purge twice a week, that isn't okay, right? And if you're someone that won't eat in front of other people, That's not okay. So we have this category of disordered eating that isn't clinical eating disorder, but it's clearly not healthy, right? And it's not okay. This person has a problem, right? So these three items are going to result in a decrease in performance, much higher risk of injury. This person hasn't got enough calories, so their energy levels are going to be low. So particularly if they're jumping and somersaulting, and they're likely to get hurt, right? Or they're not concentrating and they could get hurt. You're running hurdles and you land wrong, you can blow your knee out, right? So we, as a group, are not qualified to deal with that problem, right? So if you suspect anything, it's important to get that individual referred to a nutritionist and a doctor, because you might be able to recognize it, but even if you've got some good ideas of what could be done, you're not qualified for that, and then if something went wrong, then you set yourself up for some problems. Okay? There's some characteristics there, just in case any of you don't know, anyone that's had that. I've known a lot, because I was a gymnast, so a lot of people in my life. Okay, so I'm just going to flip this. This is my last slide. And this is, as I said the other day, you know, I was a gymnast who should not have been a gymnast, but it's the sport I picked. And at the time, that was in the 70s, at the time, coaches were not very educated. And they can be really unkind. You know, when you're 12, 13, 14 years old and you get told every single night that you're fat, you start to believe you're fat. And it doesn't matter whether you are or you aren't, you become fat in your head, right? So this young lady, Christy Henrik, was a really, really top-class American gymnast. And her specialty was asymmetric bars. She got qualified for the World Championship team and went to the World Championships in 1989, and she made the finals for the asymmetric bar event and came fourth. Well, she was the only American gymnast, I think, to make a final at that time. So, I mean, this was really, really excellent, right? This was an amazing performance, because at this point in time, the only people who won medals were Romanians or Russians, right? So to come in fourth, that was amazing. So she was like, I'm going to go to the Olympics. That's my goal now. I want to go to the Olympics and I'm going to win a medal on bars. That was her goal. So during national training camp or maybe at trials, one of the judges said to her, you won't make the Olympic team, you're too fat, we don't want you in a US leotard at the Olympics. So she went on a diet. And she kept going. And she dieted and dieted and dieted. And she died in 1994, so just 5 years after her amazing performance at World Championships. She was 47 pounds when she died. So really, really sad, totally unnecessary. Just some silly throwaway comment that some ignorant person made, right? And it led to this young lady losing her life. If it's possible to say that something good came out of it, the US Gymnastics Association did a major shake-up, And in fact, internationally, there was a major shake-up, and certainly in US gymnastics, they started adding nutrition information into the coaching exams that people had to take and things like that. And the standard for really lean, vein-popping, lymph node-popping gymnasts that the Romanians introduced gradually went away, and now we have people like we've got on the American team now who are little powerhouses, right? But it took a tragedy for that to change. But it's just an example. You've got to be careful what you say. What you say as the important person in that individual's life can make a difference. Okay? All right, so Wednesday, we will do another chapter. Hint, hint. Hint, hint. Okay?